If you've clicked on this link, you probably have seen this movie, Mikey and Nicky. I'm going to go tell you why I think it's great, or a number of interesting analytical things about it. But if you haven't seen this movie, I think you should see it, especially if you're a cinephile, you really like movies and interesting character-rich movies like this. Mikey and Nicky is a 1976 mobster drama, although the mob doesn't really factor in this movie that much, by Elaine May, who made this movie and then didn't make another movie for another decade. This movie didn't do well at the box office, and if you look at Wikipedia, anything standard on the internet, and the common reviews back at the time in the 1970s, some of them weren't very good, including several name critics who thought this was just okay or mediocre. But since it's had a revival, it's in the Criterion Collection, I think part of the interest is in the actors who helped improvise the script. John Cassavetes and Peter Falk play the Mikey and Nicky of the title. Two friends, one's in deep trouble with the mob, the other's trying to help him out. Both are very, very tortured in their own ways, especially in their friendship. But this is a very strong friendship movie, and thanks to Cassavetes and Falk, who are really, really solid in this. In fact, this movie, like a number of very good 1970s movies, I've covered a few on my channel, like The Friends of Eddie Coyle, maybe like Night Moves, use the genre, or a couple of genres, as sort of their kernel idea or kernel form, or both for the movie, but then they sort of wander and meander around. I don't think it's a deconstruction of the genre. I think it's just an exploration of other things here, the emotional realism of the characters, the psychological gut-wrenchingness that they have, and that's of more importance, a sort of 1970s movie humanism, exploring any character in their sort of inner state and their vast inner realms, than following a genre formula as a genre picture might. And I love a movie like this where you get the kernel tension, and it's brought up in the first 5 minutes, where Nicky awakes and he sees that he's in deep trouble. People know, it's in the media, that he's stolen money from the mob, and probably the mob's looking for him, so he's in a state of panic. He calls up his buddy Mikey, played by Peter Falk, and asks for help, asks for shelter, and he's desperate because he doesn't want to die. Let's begin sort of a journey where Mikey, very perturbed with Nicky for a lot of reasons, and you'll see them come out in the movie in conversation, decides to help Nicky out and may even run away with him, even though they have wives to take care of. I think Mikey has a kid. I'm not sure about Nicky if he has children. Mikey certainly does. And yet, would they do the sort of classic American thing and go off together as a sort of a buddy pair? Well, this is a buddy pair movie. It's definitely a movie that philosophically meditates on friendship as well, with two mobsters who may or may not have criminal intentions for other people, maybe even each other, in their past or in their future. So the genre movies coming up here, obviously it's a mobster movie. You had, The Godfather just a few years earlier, and a few other movies like that. So here you've got the core of this, where a mobster is in trouble with the mob for doing something against them. Well, if anybody's seen The Godfather, which they definitely have by this point, and even Godfather Part 2, which came out in the prior year, you would understand that central story tension and then what tends to happen in those movies. But it also has the paranoid thriller, which was going strong in the early to mid-1970s at its core. Occasionally you'll have cuts to an assassin, a mob assassin, trying to find these guys, follow them around, hunting for Nicky because he's sent on a mission to assassinate them. That character is played by Ned Beatty, and this movie, as I said, sort of messes with its genre somewhat. Ned Beatty is not your typical assassin, wiry, cold-blooded, cold-hearted assassin. He's a little bumbly. He can't figure things out. And that's going to be the nature of the movie, where it sort of bumbles and stumbles and meanders as these two guys, Mikey and Nicky, go to different places, trying to figure out what they're going to do to evade the mob's wrath. They end up going to a black bar. They go to a graveyard where Nicky's mom is buried, and that's a very long, interesting scene. They may try to go to the movie theater. Certainly the assassin does. And then they'll have a couple different difficult encounters with women involved in the movie. But I think part of this strategy here is that Elaine May is, influenced by Cassavetes to some extent, who had been making movies now for, 15 to 20 years, but especially in the early 1970s, movies like Husbands, for example, Woman Under the Influence. And here, this is very much like that, especially in the emotional rawness that comes up between the two characters and the relationship with other minor characters as well. Personal trauma is explored here, family dynamics that are painful, past things that have happened to them, even their beliefs in God and the afterlife will show up, and then those emotions will come out in the acting. It's method acting, I think, by these two men, Cassavetes and Falk, and then they will demonstrate the emotional rawness like on each and every scene, and the compilation of scenes ends up showing you a full picture of two human beings. These aren't just ordinary low-level mobster types who in typical genre movies like this do bad things and get offed in 10 minutes. They're going to be explored for 100 minutes, and all the various aspects of their life, the vicissitudes and the problems I've encountered that have made them who they are. And May shoots this, I think it was an improvisational style, but there's a lot of deliberate editing, especially in showing the two men, and in different scenes at different times they're together and they're equals. They're vastly separated, where one is manipulating or hurting somebody else. At other times, one's more powerful or in more command. That tends to be Mikey, who is helping Nicky out. And then formally, this movie, I think critics in the 70s weren't paying attention, as much good attention to form as I think people over the last 20 to 30 to 40 years have, where it's very much chiaroscuro as they go through a Philadelphia nightscape. And another genre or subgenre of this movie is one night in the city, where two men are trying to figure out, or a man or two men are trying to figure out their lives and trying to escape the night, as it were, and get back into the daylight. Well, here there's a lot of chiaroscuro, as I said. There's dark blacks, where each character sort of explores his identity and his identity in their friendship. That black background, which is night, which is the night sky maybe, but it works as sort of a blank slate, and a very dark blank slate on which these characters write themselves, talk about themselves, open up to each other. So that makes this movie not just about individuals, and exploring individuals in a humanistic way, but a pair, the bond of male friendship here in this movie, which is a very, as I said earlier, this is a vast, deep philosophical conversation about what is a friend, what's a friend in America, what's a friend in the 1970s, what are middle-aged men. Cassavetes had already made a movie like this with Husbands, so you might watch this movie in conversation with that movie, where both Cassavetes and Falk played troubled characters in Husbands early in the 1970s. I find that because this movie plays with genre and the acting and all that, I think it's really much better than some of the critics back in the 70s said. It's been rediscovered. That's going to happen with occasionally movies here or there where we miswatch them in our time when they're released, and then later on, 10 to 15 to 40 years later, people rediscover them. There may be a few more to discover, and, you know, after watching this movie, I wish Elaine May had worked more, especially in this vein, which she could have, the late 1970s to the 80s. I'm not saying it was physically or financially. She was able to do it. But if people would have said, hey, that's a good director, hey, she's pretty interesting as an artist, Hollywood studios and so on, and given her, you know, more leeway to do something, you wish that's what would have happened. And of course, later on in her career, she makes one of the biggest bombs ever, Ishtar, with Warren Beatty and Dustin Hoffman, which has been reassessed as being not that bad. When I was a kid, Ishtar was like the buzzword to go to for terrible movie, like absolutely horrible movie. Well, she made that as a director. But there is a little bit of crossover between Mikey and Nicky and Ishtar, as it turns out. You watch her and you know she's in conversation with Coppola and Scorsese, and then later on, they'd be in conversation with her. You watch this movie, watch Goodfellas, there's a lot of interesting overlap and thoughtfulness between all these movies. Maybe even something like weird like After Hours by Scorsese. Her vision here is really, really strong and deserves to be watched if you like any of the stuff I brought up or any of the formal elements that I think are pretty praiseworthy in this movie. Now, what do you think of Mikey and Nicky, or anything that was said in this video? Please let us know in the comments. Subscribe to my channel, Letterboxd, Substack. Thank you very much. Have a great day.